I stopped supporting my wife financially after catching her cheating with my best friend. A new Reddit cheating story. As soon as my cheating wife, Jessica, left for her so-called business trip to New York with her lover, I put my plan into motion. I drained every cent from our joint accounts, blocked her number, and severed every connection between us. The next day, her mother called me, screaming, "Selfish bastard. Because of you, she can't enjoy her trip with a real man." I smirked, replying, "If he's such a real man, he can pay for her escort services." Her audible gasp was music to my ears before I hung up. But let's backtrack. I'm Eric, a software engineer from Dallas, Texas. For 8 years, I believed I was happily married to Jessica, a marketing manager. Together, we built what seemed like a perfect life. A cozy home in the suburbs, 2 nice cars in the driveway, and a relationship that friends admired. But over time, the cracks began to show. Jessica became distant. Late nights at work became the norm, and her phone was glued to her hand, always angled away when I was near. I dismissed my suspicions, telling myself I was overthinking it. But one night, the truth hit me like a freight train. Jessica had fallen asleep, her phone lighting up with a message. Unable to ignore the growing doubt, I picked it up. What I found shattered my world. Intimate messages between her and her lover, filled with plans for their business trip to New York. The betrayal wasn't just in the affair. It was in her lies, her cold calculation. That night, as she slept beside me, I realized everything had to change. The next morning, I sprang into action. I transferred all our joint funds into my personal account. It wasn't about greed. It was about reclaiming what I had worked hard for. Then I blocked her number and removed her from our shared phone plan. I alerted close friends and family about what was happening, ensuring the truth was clear before she had a chance to spin her lies. When Jessica landed in New York, the fallout began. She tried calling, only to find herself blocked. Emails bounced. Social media messages went unanswered. I knew she'd turn to her family, and sure enough, her mother called, furious. But when I delivered my cold, calculated response, even her mother was left speechless. Jessica thought she could betray me without consequences, but she underestimated me. Now the chapter of our shared life was closed, and this time, I was the one holding the pen. As Jessica wheeled her suitcase out the door, all smiles and full of perfectly crafted lies, Eric watched silently, his emotions simmering beneath the surface. She kissed him goodbye, confident in her deceit, and drove away toward her business trip to New York. The moment her car disappeared down the driveway, Eric sprang into action. He logged into their joint bank accounts, his heart pounding but his resolve unshaken. With methodical precision, he transferred every last cent into his personal account, leaving just enough for her to notice. This wasn't about the money. It was about reclaiming the power Jessica had stolen with her betrayal. Next, he blocked her number and removed her from their shared phone plan. Calls, texts, emails, he cut her off entirely. He even disconnected her from their shared social media accounts, ensuring there was no way for her to contact him or snoop on his life. By the time the dust settled, Jessica's lifelines had been severed. Eric sat back, the quiet of the house amplifying his anticipation. He imagined her in a hotel room with her lover, confused as her credit cards were declined and her calls went unanswered. The thought brought a grim smile to his face. This was justice, not revenge, a reckoning for her lies and betrayal. The fallout began the next morning. As Eric sipped his coffee, his phone buzzed. Seeing his mother-in-law's name on the screen, he wasn't surprised. Jessica had clearly turned to her family after realizing what he had done. "You selfish bastard," her shrill voice exploded through the phone. "Because of you, Jessica can't enjoy her trip with a real man." Eric smirked, letting her rant until she paused for breath. Then, in a calm, measured tone, he delivered his response. "If he's a real man, he'll gladly pay for her escort services." The gasp on the other end of the line was all the confirmation Eric needed. Without waiting for her to recover, he hung up, feeling the weight lift from his shoulders. Jessica's dream getaway unraveled swiftly. Stranded without access to their joint funds, she turned to her lover, who now bore the financial burden of their trip. Eric could only imagine the tension brewing between them as their romantic escape became a logistical nightmare. Her family wasn't spared the fallout either. Her mother's calls turned from angry tirades to desperate pleas, but Eric ignored them all. They had enabled her lies, and now they, too, would face the consequences. Through it all, Eric found peace. The betrayal that once consumed him was now a distant memory, overshadowed by the satisfaction of reclaiming his life. Jessica had gambled and lost, and Eric had risen above her deceit to rebuild a future free from her lies. Reflecting on his journey, Eric knew he had emerged stronger. Sometimes, he thought, you have to make sure they feel the consequences of their actions. That's the only way to truly move on. For Eric, this wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, dignity, and the power of standing up for himself. And with each step forward, he knew he had done the right thing.